3 years, the Thunderwolves ran Blue Summit, Montana like they owned it. They ruled the roads with iron fists and colder hearts. No one challenged them, no one even dared to say no. But all that changed the day they picked the wrong girl, at the wrong gas station. It happened at Miller's, just before sunset. 8 motorcycles circled Hannah Collins like predators in a feeding frenzy, their chrome flashing under the fading light. Their leader, a man they called Serpent, looked at her like she was just another easy mark. Soft, alone, vulnerable. He had no idea how wrong he was. He didn't know Hannah's father. He didn't know Daniel Collins had spent 20 years in Delta Force, or that the man had medals locked away in a drawer he never bragged about. He didn't know the kind of storm he was about to unleash. The Thunderwolves were about to learn that some people stay quiet, not because they're scared, but because they know exactly what they're capable of. Quick pause. Where are you watching from? If this kind of story hits you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow's episode, even wilder. Back to it. The shadows stretched long across Miller's as Hannah finished filling up her old Toyota. 150,000 miles and counting. She was a school counselor, and that car had seen every back road and every broken home in the district. Being there for her students meant everything. Even if it drained her gas tank weekly, she moved with calm precision, screwing the cap back on as the sun dipped low. The only sounds were the buzz of the overhead lights and the distant cry of an eagle somewhere high above. Inside, Mike Reynolds, the station's owner, gave her a wave. He'd known her since she was a kid, ever since her dad retired from the military and brought the family to Blue Summit. Then came the sound. Faint at first, a low, rolling growl on the wind. Hannah froze, her hand inches from the car door. Her father's training kicked in. Instincts honed since childhood, and every one of them whispered the same thing. Something's coming. The rumble grew louder, heavier. A line of motorcycles emerged through the heat haze, rolling into the lot like they owned it. 8 in total, forming a slow, precise circle around her. Inside the store, Mike's face went pale. His hand inched toward the phone, eyes locked on the scene outside. Engines roared. Then, one by one, they cut off. The silence afterward was somehow even more threatening. The last to kill his engine was their leader, Victor Serpent Stone. His leather vest was covered in patches that screamed territory, power, and blood. The Thunderwolves insignia was stitched across his back like a war flag. "Well, what do we have here?" Serpent's voice slithered across the pavement, slick with mock politeness. He stepped off his bike, boots crunching gravel. "Looks like someone's little girl stayed out too late." Hannah didn't flinch. One hand rested casually in her pocket, right over her phone. Her dad's number was on speed dial. She prayed she wouldn't need it. "This station's public property," she said, calm, steady, "and I'm done here." "So, if you'll excuse me," laughter broke the air. Jason Wraith Cruz, Serpent's second in command, barked it out like a dog off the leash. "Hear that, boss?" She thinks she's just gonna drive away. The other bikers spread out, forming a complete circle. Mike Hammer Peters cracked his knuckles, all 6'5" of him grinning like a bear. Ryan Dragon Cole and Travis Stormhunt flanked Serpent with quiet menace. "You know," Serpent said, stepping closer, "Blue Summit ain't as safe as it used to be. Pretty thing like you shouldn't be alone." He smiled wide, too wide. "Lucky for you, the Thunderwolves offer protection." Hannah's brain went into overdrive. 8 attackers, multiple angles, no cover. The cameras were rolling, sure, but cops out here weren't minutes away, more like 15. "I appreciate the offer," she said, voice clipped, professional. The same tone she used when calming down angry teenagers. "But I can take care of myself." Serpent stepped even closer, close enough she could smell the leather and smoke. "See, that's not how it works. We offer, you accept. Otherwise," he motioned to his crew, "let's just say accidents happen." Inside, Mike whispered into the phone, frantic. "Dan, it's Mike. You need to get to the station, now. They've got Hannah, and it doesn't look good. His other hand hovered near the shotgun beneath the counter, but he knew better. These men didn't make idle threats, and one wrong move could start something no one could stop. Back outside, Serpent reached out. "Last chance, sweetheart," he sneered, fingertips brushing the air near her face. "What's it gonna be?" Hannah took one step back, and that's where everything started to change. Smooth and controlled. "Don't touch me!" Hannah's voice was calm, almost gentle, but beneath it was steel, a tone that didn't match the fear they expected. It threw the bikers off just for a moment. Serpent's smirk wavered. He wasn't used to this. Not in Blue Summit. People here either obeyed or disappeared. No one ever looked him in the eye and said no. "You picked the wrong answer," he growled, dropping the mask of politeness. "Boys, looks like someone needs a reminder and respect." Boots scraped across the asphalt as the Thunderwolves started to move in. The sun dipped low, casting long shadows across the gas station, shadows that reached like claws. But none of them noticed the black pickup easing onto the access road. Its engine purred low, controlled, and the man behind the wheel, his expression was ice. Daniel Collins had arrived, and in the deepening twilight, Hannah saw the headlights and let a quiet smile tug at her lips. The wolves thought they were predators. They were about to meet a different kind of animal entirely. Danger didn't always wear leather and patches. Sometimes it wore a flannel shirt, drove an old truck, and carried 20 years of classified combat experience like it was nothing. This was the man who taught her to breathe through fear. To think when others panicked, to know when the game shifted, when the hunted became the hunters. The truck's headlights washed over the lot like floodlights. In that harsh glow, the Thunderwolves were about to face a truth they couldn't intimidate or outnumber. Daniel killed the engine, but left the lights blazing. He saw everything. 8 bikes, formation tight, his daughter calm in the center, and the man who had just tried to put hands on her. That was enough. Delta Force training kicked in like muscle memory. In one glance, Daniel cataloged it all. 3 of them had military stances. 2 clean, 2 controlled. 2 were just brute strength. The last 3, including Serpent, were hiding weapons. All of it registered in a blink. As he stepped onto the pavement, Daniel's mind flashed to that morning. Breakfast with Hannah. She'd been talking about a student, worried, frustrated. "Everyone's so scared of the Thunderwolves," she'd said. "These kids need to see that bullies don't always win." At the time, he hadn't known just how right she'd be. "Evening, gentlemen," Daniel called across the lot, his voice quiet but firm. No yelling. Men who know what they're capable of never need to raise their voice. "Seems like we've got ourselves a situation." Serpent's eyes narrowed, irritated at the interruption. "Mind your business, old man. This don't concern you." "You're wrong about that," Daniel said, still moving forward with the kind of deliberate calm that unnerves real killers. "That young woman you're surrounding, she's my daughter. So yeah, this very much concerns me." Inside the store, Mike Reynolds was back on the phone. "Mark, it's Mike. You need to get here now. Dan Collins just rolled up. And the Thunderwolves? They don't have a clue who they're dealing with." Hannah hadn't moved, but her posture had. Subtle, almost invisible to the untrained eye. She'd seen this before, once, long ago. Not what her father did, but how he did it. Quiet, precise, efficient. That memory had stayed with her not because it was violent, but because it was surgical. "Daddy Collins coming to save the day?" Wraith sneered, but his voice had a crack in it. He'd seen something familiar. The way Daniel moved, it triggered instincts from a different life. Wraith had served once too. He recognized the real ones. Daniel stopped, just far enough to stay in control. "Last chance," he said. "Step away from my daughter. Get on your bikes. Ride out, and we can pretend this never happened." Hammer, the biggest of the crew, stepped forward with a grin. "Or what, old man? You gonna take on all of us?" Daniel smiled, but his eyes never changed. Cold, measuring, calculating. "You're former Marines, right?" he said to Wraith and Storm. Afghanistan, maybe 2010? Your stances give you away. Muscle memory's hard to shake. Wraith and Storm exchanged a quick glance, a flicker of hesitation. Dragon, another biker, took a half step back. He could feel it too, the shift in the air. Serpent tried to reclaim control. Doesn't matter what they were, he snapped. This is Thunderwolf's territory. Your daughter needs to learn some damn respect. And looks like you do too. Daniel's eyes never left his. Respect, he said quietly, is earned. What you're offering? That's just fear. Big difference. Hammer cracked his knuckles again. Doesn't matter what words you use, he growled. Still fresh meat. Hannah watched her father adjust his stance. Barely noticeable, but she knew the cue. She'd seen it before every time he showed her how to break a chokehold. Every time he reminded her, stay calm, stay ready. Daniel's tone stayed casual. You know what I see? 3 vets who forgot their training. 2 big guys confusing size for skill. And 3 bottom feeders who've never faced a real threat. Then his gaze locked onto Serpent. Still, icy. Want to guess which one you are? And for the first time in years, Serpent felt something unfamiliar. Doubt. This wasn't how it went. Not in Blue Summit. People begged, people ran. People didn't dissect his crew like they were lab rats. Boss, Wraith said under his breath. Ain't right here. Shut up, Serpent snapped. But it was too late. The seed of doubt had been planted. His voice got louder, his posture more aggressive, as if that could erase the shift in momentum. Last warning, old man. Walk away now, or they won't find enough of you to bury. Daniel Collins sighed, not with fear, but with a quiet, measured weight, almost like disappointment. You know what the hardest part of Delta Force training was? He said, as casually as if he were discussing the weather. It wasn't surviving. It wasn't killing. It was learning not to kill. Learning to use only the force required. No more, no less. The word Delta hit Wraith and Storm like a shockwave. They knew what it meant, knew it deep in their bones, even if Serpent didn't. Storm, halfway to drawing his knife, froze. His instinct screamed at him to stop. Boss, he said, his voice edged with warning. We should... But Serpent wasn't hearing it. Pride blinded him. Rage drove his hand to the pistol hidden under his vest. It was a mistake, a fatal one. Before Serpent's fingers could even touch the grip, Daniel Collins moved, and reminded everyone in that gas station why Delta Force operators are considered the most dangerous fighters on Earth. In a blur of motion, Serpent was on the ground, face down, arm twisted behind his back in a lock so precise it looked effortless, until the pain hit. First rule of combat, Daniel said, voice like calm thunder in the silence. Never telegraph your intentions. His knee pinned Serpent in place with almost no effort at all. Efficient, controlled, deadly. Hammer reacted first, charging like a freight train. A man who'd never been outmatched before. Daniel's free hand moved in a perfect arc, intercepting Hammer's wrist and redirecting the force. Crack! Hammer's head slammed into the gas pump. His body dropped seconds later. Second rule, Daniel continued, still holding Serpent with ease. Size only matters if you know how to use it. Hannah hadn't moved. Her calm wasn't an act. It was training. Years of drills in the garage. Sunday afternoons spent learning not just to defend, but to think under pressure. Wraith and Storm were no longer in combat mode. They were in analysis mode, watching the angles, the flow, the precision. That's advanced CQC, Storm muttered. Special ops level. Dragon stepped forward, adrenaline kicking in, but Wraith grabbed his arm. Don't, he warned. I've seen that before. He's not just Delta, he's something more. Inside the store, Mike Reynolds stood in stunned silence. 2 decades of watching the Thunderwolves terrorize Blue Summit hadn't prepared him for this. For the day the wolves got hunted, Hannah watched Serpent struggle beneath her father's grip, not with strength, but with disbelief. He couldn't process how quickly it had turned, how completely. Kill him, Serpent screamed to his crew. What are you waiting for? but none of them moved. They were watching the man they feared most, broken. The illusion of power they'd built so carefully was crumbling right in front of them. "You know what separates us?" Daniel said, still calm, still holding Serpent like a parent restraining a tantrum. "You use fear to feel strong. I use strength, so others don't have to be afraid." Sheriff Stevens was still 5 minutes out. Sirens off. He'd known Daniel Collins for over a decade, but only now understood what that quiet, composed man had been hiding all these years. "Stand down," Wraith called out, voice firm. His military training finally cut through the noise. "This isn't a fight we can win." "Traitor!" Serpent snarled, but there was no power behind it anymore. Just panic. Then Dragon reached for a knife. Bad move. Hannah stepped forward. Her motion was swift, elegant, and familiar. She twisted Dragon's wrist with practiced control. The blade hit the asphalt and skittered away. "Like father, like daughter," Daniel said with a proud smirk, never loosening his hold on Serpent. "Though your form could use some work, honey. Keep your elbow tucked." "Really, Dad?" Hannah huffed, even as adrenaline pulsed in her veins. "We're critiquing now?" A flicker of a smile between them, even here, even now. The rest of the Thunderwolves began to back away, confidence shattered, bravado draining from their faces. The ones who thought they were untouchable had just seen their toughest members dropped in seconds. Storm lowered his hand from his weapon. The fight was over, and they all knew it. 20 years, Daniel said, turning to Wraith and Storm. 20 years serving our country. And this is what you become? Bullies in a small town? They said nothing. What could they say? Their empire had crumbled in under 5 minutes. Because sometimes, all it takes is the right storm. Small towns, threatening young women. The Marines I knew were better than that. Daniel's voice didn't need to rise. It didn't accuse. But the quiet disappointment cut deeper than any shout could have, and Wraith and Storm felt it like a punch to the gut. That tone, it wasn't just a man talking, it was a superior officer reminding them of who they used to be. "We lost our way," Wraith finally admitted, the words dragging like chains. "After coming home, nothing felt right. The club gave us something. Structure, brotherhood." "Brotherhood?" Daniel repeated. There was no mockery in his voice. Only a calm, genuine question. "Is this what you fought for overseas? To become the very thing we were trained to protect people from?" The sound of approaching headlights swept over the scene as Sheriff Stevens's cruiser rolled down the access road. But the real battle wasn't playing out with fists anymore. It was happening in the minds of men who were suddenly seeing themselves clearly, maybe for the first time in years. Serpent felt it, control, slipping. The reputation he'd built, the power he'd ruled with, all of it crumbling in the presence of one man. One man who didn't need a gang, who didn't need noise or threats, just strength rooted in purpose. Daniel turned to them all. "Last chance," he said evenly. "You can be better than this. You were better than this. Once, when you wore different uniforms, when you served something greater than yourselves." The sun had nearly disappeared behind the mountains. The gas station stood still, shadows stretching long across the asphalt. And in that quiet moment, the Thunderwolves stood at a crossroads, one that would define the rest of their lives. Because sometimes the hardest battles don't involve guns or knives. Sometimes they require the courage to admit, you've lost your way. Sheriff Mark Stevens stepped out of his cruiser, hand resting lightly on his holster. 15 years in law enforcement had taught him to assess danger quickly. But this scene defied everything he'd ever experienced. The infamous Thunderwolves, Blue Summit's nightmare, stood disarmed, disoriented, and defeated, while one man, without raising his voice or drawing a weapon, held their leader on the ground. "Evening, Dan," Stevens called, crunching over gravel. "Looks like I missed a hell of a party." Daniel nodded slightly, still keeping Serpent pinned. Just a conversation, Mark, about choices. Nearby, Hammer was groaning against a gas pump. Dragon clutched his twisted wrist, and the rest of the Thunderwolves stood scattered, Their earlier swagger evaporated like mist. 3 years, Mike Reynolds said, stepping out of the store at last, his voice tight. 3 years they've bled this town dry. Protection money, broken windows, burned down garages. Never thought I'd live to see them brought down. Sheriff Stevens scanned the lot, a knife lying untouched, a pistol never drawn, and Wraith and Storm now standing slightly apart, as if Daniel's words had reawakened something buried deep inside. You know what got me through 20 years in the field? Daniel said, speaking now to all of them. It wasn't training, wasn't weapons, it was purpose. Knowing that everything we did meant something. Wraith shifted, unsteady. The words struck something real. When I came back, that purpose was gone, he admitted. The club filled the hole, but with fear, Hannah said gently, stepping forward, her counselor instincts rising to the surface. You replaced purpose with intimidation. Is that really what you fought for? Storm looked at the ground, shame crawling across his face. We didn't mean to become this, he murmured. It started small, just throwing weight around. Then it got easier. The line kept moving, and we just stopped noticing. Sheriff Stevens pulled out his cuffs, but Daniel raised a hand. Give them a minute, he said quietly. Sometimes men need to face themselves before they face justice. Serpent thrashed beneath him, rage lashing out like a cornered animal. Don't listen to this garbage. We're the Thunderwolves. We don't bow. Daniel's gaze didn't waver. And where has that gotten you? He asked, cutting through the tension like a scalpel. Look around. Look at what you've become. And worse, look at what you've turned others into. Mike Reynolds stepped forward, the fire in his voice building now. You want the truth? He said. Come inside. I've got 3 years of footage. Old shopkeepers forced to pay protection. Teen girls afraid to walk home. The Anderson girl. Her window smashed because she said no. And Thompson's garage? You torched it for calling the cops. Every word landed like a hammer. Wraith's eyes flickered with horror. The armor he'd built around himself cracked. And behind it, regret. We were Marines, Storm said softly, almost to himself. We had honor. You still can, Daniel said, his voice now like a steady flame. The men you were, they're still in there, buried maybe, but not gone. Sheriff Stevens looked on, something shifting inside him too. He'd always wondered about Daniel, the quiet guy with a love for fishing and a past he never talked about. But now he saw it, understood. Daniel hadn't just dismantled a gang tonight, he'd dismantled their entire belief system. You trained her, Wraith said suddenly, eyes on Hannah. The way she moved? Daniel nodded. Since she was 12, every Sunday. But not just the moves, the mindset. That strength isn't about hurting people. It's about protecting them. And Serpent? He was still pinned, still yelling. But no one was listening anymore. It was all unraveling before Serpent's eyes. Years of fear. Carefully cultivated dominance. It was fracturing, dissolving in the face of something far more powerful than violence. Redemption. You have a choice to make, Daniel said, still holding Serpent to the pavement, but now speaking to the group as a whole. Keep walking this road. See where it ends. Or remember who you were. Who you could be again. Hannah stood nearby, watching the battle shift from the physical to the personal. As a counselor, she recognized the signs, that quiet moment where a person teeters between destruction and salvation. Then Sheriff Stevens spoke, his voice steady. The VA helped me launch a veteran program over in Helena. We've got room for men who want to find their way back. The sun had long set. The gas station lights flickered above, harsh and cold, throwing long shadows across faces contorted by inner conflict. And in that glow, the Thunderwolves didn't look like monsters anymore. They looked like men, lost, haunted, searching. Storm moved first. With deliberate hands, he removed his gang cut, the patch-covered leather vest that had defined him for years, and let it fall to the ground. Thud. The sound echoed like a gunshot in the still night air, a signal. One by one, Wraith, then another, and another, followed, stripping away the symbols of their violence, of their fear. Only Dragon and Hammer remained still, caught between the identity they'd built and the brothers who were walking away from it. Serpent said nothing. He didn't need to. The silence around him said it all. His empire had fallen, and the men he thought would kill for him were choosing something else. Daniel's voice cut through the moment, low but clear. It won't be easy. Coming back from the dark never is, but nothing worth doing ever is. The pile of discarded vests grew, and with them a sense of possibility. Not just a resignation from gang life, but a step back toward something better, toward honor. The fluorescent lights flickered above them as if unsure how to shine on something so human. These weren't outlaws now. They were men facing the hardest mission of their lives, coming home as Sheriff Stevens radioed for backup and Hannah helped Mike Reynolds lock up the store. A new chapter in Blue Summit was quietly being written, not with fear, but with courage. The kind that whispers instead of shouts, the kind that chooses change. Dragon stared at the pile of vests, his hand subconsciously rubbing his sore wrist, the one Hannah had neutralized. The night air was thick with the weight of choices. Behind him, Hammer stood tall, bleeding, bruised, but still defiant. "You're all dead," Serpent snarled from beneath Daniel's hold. "The Death Riders will hear about this. They'll burn this town to the ground." Daniel didn't flinch, but at the mention of the rival gang, his gaze hardened. "More threats, more violence," he said coldly. "Is that all you know? Is that all you are?" Hammer stepped forward, jaw tight. "It's all that works." But even he didn't sound convinced anymore. Hannah walked toward him, calm and clear. "Is it? Really? Look around you, Hammer. What's all that fear and violence actually given you? Broken lives? Broken trust? A community that prays you don't show up?" Mike Reynolds stepped up beside her. "You want to know what strength looks like?" he said. "When Dan first came to town, we got hit by a flood, roads underwater, businesses wiped out. He didn't make threats. He didn't charge protection fees. He rallied the veterans, worked around the clock, saved half the town." He pointed to Daniel. "That's strength." "People are weak," Serpent spat, grasping at the last threads of control. "They need to be ruled." "No," Daniel said quietly. "People are strong. Sometimes they just forget, like your men did when they wore real uniforms. When they stood for something." Storm bent down and picked up his cut, tracing the patchwork with his fingers. His voice cracked. "I remember my first deployment. We were there to help people, to protect. When did we stop being that?" Sheriff Stevens moved through the group, collecting weapons as they were offered up. Some handed them over with hesitation, some with relief. Each blade, each gun, a symbol of something let go. Wraith looked up. "This program," he asked, hope rising in his voice for the first time in years, "what is it exactly?" "Structure," Stevens replied. "Counseling, purpose, job training, and above all, community, real brotherhood. One that builds." Dragon stepped toward the pile, then hesitated. Hammer grabbed his arm. "Don't be stupid," he hissed. "You think this night erases everything? You think one good moment makes you clean?" "No," Hannah said, stepping in. "But it can be the night you start over, the night you decide who you want to become." Dragon's eyes flicked between Hammer and the rest, between fear and hope. Then Daniel spoke. One last time. "I spent 20 years in combat. Want to know the hardest enemy to face? Not the one in front of you, the one inside, the one telling you you're too far gone, that you can't change." Hammer's grip tightened. "The Death Riders will come. When they do, all this talk, none of it will matter." "Maybe," Sheriff Stevens said, "but this time, they won't find a town hiding in fear." He stepped beside Daniel. "They'll find us, standing together." Mike Reynolds walked back into his store, returning moments later with something old, a dusty photo album. He opened it, holding it out for the group. Inside, faded photographs showed a different Blue Summit. Kids on bikes, families walking downtown at night, community events, smiles. "This was Blue Summit," he said. "Before the gangs, before the fear. And it can be again." And in the stillness that followed, under buzzing lights and a sky now full of stars, the Thunderwolves stood at the edge of something rare. A second chance. One moment at a gas station sparked a global transformation. In the town of Blue Summit, Daniel Collins and a group of former gang members, many of them military veterans, chose not to fight back with violence when rival gangs threatened to tear the town apart. Instead, they stood together, unarmed but united, showing strength through discipline, unity, and purpose. As the Death Riders and Pure Breeds tried to intimidate them, these reformed men, once Thunderwolves, stood like soldiers again, moving with tactical precision. What began as a standoff quickly became a turning point. The veterans' calm, organized response stunned the attackers and inspired others to question everything they thought they knew about power and fear. Daniel and his team weren't just stopping violence, they were offering a new path. With Hannah's leadership in trauma counseling and Storm and Wraith applying their military experience, a local veteran support center was born. It became a place where lost warriors could remember who they were before the pain, gangs, and rage. Within weeks, rival gang members began leaving violence behind. Some joined the program, others watched from afar, curious. When the Pure Breeds returned in force to reclaim control, they were met not with fists, but with community members standing alongside the veterans, families, business owners, former enemies, refusing to be afraid. The town chose hope over hate. Violence didn't return. From that moment, the movement spread. Veteran-led rehabilitation centers began opening across the country, then the world. Former gang leaders like Executioner became mentors. Dragon taught trades. Hannah's trauma recovery model was adopted internationally. Storm led operations. Wraith trained law enforcement. Together they built something far stronger than any gang, a global brotherhood rooted in healing, not harm. In 2 years, Blue Summit became the symbol of transformation. Gang violence dropped by 90% in affected areas. Over 10,000 veterans found purpose again. What started as one man refusing to throw a punch became a worldwide program guiding lost warriors home. Not with fear, but with honor, discipline, and the courage to change.